Alright, this is the forward or whatever. The old woman remembered a swan she had bought many years ago in Shanghai for a foolish sum. This bird, this bird, boasted the market vendor, was once a duck that stretched its neck in hopes of becoming a goose. And now look, it is too beautiful to eat. Then the woman and the swan sailed across an ocean many thousands of li wide. So li is a Chinese unit of measurement for distance, and it's about like 500 meters. Stretching their necks towards America. On her journey, she cooed to the swan, "In America, I will have a daughter just like." Alright, I'm just kidding. Um, in America, I'll have a daughter just like me. But over there, nobody will say her worth is measured by the loudness of her husband's belch. Over. What? Over there, nobody will look down on her because I'll make her speak only perfect American English. And over there, she will always be too full to swallow any sorrow. She will know my meaning because I will give her this swan, a creature that became more than what was hoped for. But when she arrived in the new country, the immigration officials pulled her swan away from her. Yeah, because you're not allowed to bring live animals through immigration, you dumb bitch. I'm just kidding. Uh, Leaving the woman fluttering her arms with only one swan feather for a memory. And then she had to fill out so many forms, she forgot why she had come and what she had left behind. Now the woman was old, and she had a daughter who grew up speaking only English and swallowing more. This is pretty good if you read it as a comedy. Swallowing more Coca-Cola than sorrow. For a long time now, the woman had wanted to give her daughter the single swan feather and tell her, "This feather may look worthless, but it comes from afar, and carries with it all my good intentions." And she waited year after year for the day she could tell her daughter this in perfect American English. Alright, looks like perfect American English is gonna be one of the main motifs of this book. Did I miss anything? Alright. Okay. The fuck? The scrolling is annoying. Alright, here we go. Jing-Mei Wu. So I think they split the book up into like different like character arcs or whatever. And this is one of them. The Joy Luck Club. My father has asked me to be the fourth corner at the Joy Luck Club. I am to replace my mother, whose seat at the mahjong table has been empty since she died 2 months ago. My father thinks she was killed by her own thoughts. She had a new idea inside her head, said my father, but before it could come out of her mouth, the thought grew too big and burst. It must have been a very bad idea. The doctor said she died of a cerebral aneurysm, and her friends at the Joy Luck Club said she died just like a rabbit, quickly and with unfinished business left behind. What? My mother was supposed to host the next meeting of the Joy Luck Club. The week before she died, she called me, full of pride, full of life. "Auntie Lynn cooked red bean soup for Joy Luck. I'm going to cook black sesame seed soup." "Don't show off," I said. Okay, first of all, the black sesame seed soup is super easy to make in comparison to red bean one. Like, you just need to blend. It's so fast. I made it before. The red bean one you gotta cook for a long time until the red beans soften. And all right, that's not important tangent, but just like, all right, I'm gonna read the book. It's not show off. It's not show off. She said the two soups are almost the same, 差不多. Or maybe she said 不同, not the same thing at all. It was one of those Chinese expressions that means the better half of mixed intentions. I can never remember things I didn't understand in the first place. Alright, so this is a classic. Well, I mean, this was the experience back then, but this is a classic, like, oh, I'm so I'm so whitewashed and removed from my parents' culture. Like that's kind of what this is. But look, this came out in fucking 1980, whatever, so it's fine. My mother started the San Francisco version of the Joy Luck Club in 1949, 2 years before I was born. This was the year my mother and father left China with one stiff leather trunk filled only with fancy silk dresses. There is no time to. Oh shit, this is a weird scroll. I'm gonna do. Okay, sorry, technical difficulties. We're ready. Had anything else, my mother had explained to my father after they boarded the boat. Still his hands swam frantically between the slippery silks, looking for his cotton shirts and wool pants. When they arrived in San Francisco, my father made her hide those shiny clothes. She wore the same brown check Chinese dress until the Refugee Welcome Society gave her two hand-me-down dresses, all too large in sizes for American women. The society was composed of a group of white-haired American missionary ladies from the First Chinese Baptist Church. This is a thing. This is a big thing, like using Christianity to okay, next. And because of their gifts, my parents could not refuse their invitation to join the church, nor could they ignore the old lady's practical advice to improve their English through Bible study class on Wednesday nights and later through choir practice on Saturday mornings. This was how my parents met the Sues, the Johns, and the St. Clairs. Ooh, the St. Clairs. My mother could sense that the women of these families also had unspeakable tragedies they had left behind in China and hopes they couldn't begin to express in their fragile English. Motif, I'm telling you, it's a motif. Or at least my mother recognized the numbness in these women's faces, and she saw how quickly their eyes moved when she told them her idea for the Joy Luck Club. The Joy Luck Club was an idea my mother remembered from the days of her first marriage in Guilin before the Japanese came. That's why I think of Joy Luck as her Guilin story. It was the story she would always tell me when she was bored, when there was nothing else to do, when every bowl had been washed and the formica table had been wiped down twice, when my father sat reading the newspaper and smoking one Pall-Mall cigarette after another, a warning not to disturb him. This is when my mother would take out a box of old ski sweaters sent to us by unseen relatives from Vancouver. She would snip the bottom of a sweater and pull out a kinky thread of yarn, anchoring it to a piece of cardboard, and as she began to roll with one sweeping rhythm, she would start her story. Over the years, she told me the same story except for the ending, which grew darker, casting long shadows into her life and eventually into mine. I dreamed about Guilin before I ever saw it, my mother said, speaking Chinese. I dreamed of jagged peaks lining a curving river with magic moss greening the banks, and at the tops of these peaks were white mists, and if you could float down this river and eat the moss for food, you would be strong enough to climb the peak. If you slipped, you would only fall into a bed of soft moss and laugh. And once you reach the top, you would be able to see everything and feel such happiness it would be enough to never have worries in your life again. In China, everybody dreamed about Guilin, and when I arrived, I realized how shabby my dreams were, how poor my thoughts. When I saw the hills, I laughed and shuddered at the same time. The peaks looked like giant fried fish heads. Whew, there we go with the imagery. Trying to jump out of a vat of oil. Behind each hill, I could see shadows of another fish, and then another and another. And then the clouds would move just a little, and the hills would suddenly become monstrous elephants marching slowly toward me. Can you see this? And at the root of the hill were secret caves. Inside grew hanging rock gardens in the shapes and colors of cabbage, winter melons, turnips, and onions. There are things so strange and beautiful you can't ever imagine them. I wonder if this book is kind of what started all the food cliches to describe Chinese stuff. I've definitely done this before. You always just list a bunch of exotic ingredients, and I'm not reading from the book if you don't know this. But yeah, just list stuff. But the braised pork belly glistening in the Asian waves of light, that kind of BS. Uh, where did I leave off? But I didn't come to Guilin to see how beautiful it was. The man who was my husband bought me and our two babies to Guilin because he thought it would be safe. He was an officer with the Kuomintang, and after he put us down in a small room in a two-story house, he went off to the northwest to Chongqing. So quick thing, Kuomintang, that's like the Chinese Nationalist Party. They were like I don't know my history that well, but like they used to be in China, and like that's the party that spun off to become Taiwan. And then Chongqing is Chongqing, Chongqing. I might not even be saying that right, but it's another part of China. Um, yeah. We knew the Japanese were winning, even when the newspapers said they were not. Every day, every hour, thousands of people poured into the city, crowding the sidewalks, looking for places to live. They came from the east, west, north, and south. They are rich and poor, Shanghainese, Cantonese, Northerners, and not just Chinese, but foreigners and missionaries of every religion. And there was, of course, the Kuomintang and their army officers who thought they were top level to everyone else. I wonder how, like, Americans read this when they saw it. Like, oh, the Kuomintang? Like, anyway. We were a city of leftovers mixed together. If it hadn't been for the Japanese, there would have been plenty of reason for fighting to break out among these different people. Can you see it? Shanghai people with Northwater peasants, bankers with barbers, rickshaw pullers with Burman refugees. Everybody looked down on someone else. It didn't matter that everybody shared the same sidewalk to spit on and suffered the same fast-moving diarrhea. We all had the same stink, but everybody complained about someone else smelled the worst. Me? Oh, I hated the American Air Force officers who said hubba hubba sounds to make my face turn red. But the worst were the northern peasants who emptied their noses into their hands and pushed people around and gave everybody their dirty diseases. That's how the coronavirus started, those peasants. So you can see how quickly Guilin lost its beauty for me. I no longer climbed the peaks to say, how lovely are these hills? I only wondered which hills the Japanese had reached. I sat in the dark corners of my house with a baby under each arm, waiting with nervous feet. When the sirens cried out to warn us of bombers, my neighbors and I jumped to our feet and scurried to the deep caves to hide like wild animals. But you can't stay in the dark for so long. Something inside of you starts to fade, and you become like a starving person, crazy hungry for light. Outside, I could hear the bombing. Boom, boom, and then the sound of raining rocks. And inside, I was no longer hungry for the cabbage or the turnips of the hanging rock garden. I could only see the dripping boughs of an ancient hill that might collapse on top of me. Can you imagine how it is to want to be neither inside nor outside, to want to be nowhere and disappear? Yeah, it sounds like a depression. So when the bombing sounds grew further away, we would come back out like newborn kittens, scratching our way back to the city. And always I would be amazed to find the hills against the burning sky had not been torn apart. I thought of the Joy Luck Club on a summer night that was so hot even the moths fainted to the ground. Their wings were so heavy with damp heat. Uh, every place was so crowded there was no room for fresh air. Unbearable smells from the sewers rose up to my second-story window, and the stink had nowhere else to go but into my nose. At all hours of the night and day, I heard screaming sounds. I didn't know if it was a peasant slitting. I mumble, okay? I heard. I didn't know if it was a peasant slitting the throat of a runaway pig or an officer beating a half-dead peasant for lying in his way on the sidewalk. I didn't go to the window to find out. What use would it have been? And that's when I thought I needed something to do. That's when I thought I needed something to do to help me move. My idea was to have a gathering of four women, one for each corner of my mahjong table. It's actually the sides, you can't sit in the corners, but it's cool. I knew which one I wanted to ask. They were all young like me with wishful faces. One was an army officer's wife, like myself. Another was a girl with very fine manners from a rich family in Shanghai. She had escaped with only a little money. And there was a girl from Nanjing who had the blackest hair I'd ever seen. She came from a low-class family, but she was pretty and pleasant and had married well to an old man who had died and left her with a better life. So, a gold digger. Um, I'm gonna guess this is Lena St. Clair, but I don't know. I could just be wrong. Each week, one of us would host a party to raise money and to raise our spirits. The hostess had to serve special. Yo, this is. Look at this. Look at how they fucked up the pinyin so hard on this. This is so funny. Special Diane Saiyan. Some special Diane Saiyan foods. Sounds like Super Saiyan. Special Super Saiyan foods to bring good fortune of all kinds. Dumplings shaped like silver money ingots. I don't know how you pronounce that word. Long rice noodles for long life. Woo! Boiled peanuts for conceiving sons. And of course, many good luck oranges for a plentiful sweet life. I don't know if the peanuts thing is probably kind of looks okay, but I don't know. Maybe could be. What fine foods we treated ourselves to with our meager. I don't know how to pronounce that word. Meager, meager allowances. We didn't know this. I need to look this up. Meager. Meager allowances. We didn't notice the dumplings were stuffed mostly with stringy squash and that the oranges were spotted with wormy holes. We ate sparingly, not as if we didn't have enough, but to protest how we could not eat another bite. We had already bloated ourselves from earlier in the day. We knew we had luxuries few people could afford. We were the lucky ones. After filling our stomachs, we would then fill a bowl with money and put it where everyone could see. Then we would sit down at the mahjong table. My table was from my family and was of a very fragrant red wood, not what you would call rosewood, but hongmu, which is so fine that there's no English word for it. What? The table had a very thick pad so that when the mahjong pie were spilled onto the table, the only sound was of ivory tiles washing against each other. Pie just means tiles. She just added a little flair to add some flair to her writing. Some Chinese words. Okay, I do that in my comedy sometimes. Once we started to play, nobody would speak except to say pong or what the fuck? It's chur. That's not it. What is this? Chur. What is chur? There's like song and gong. The fuck is chur? Anyway, when taking a top, we had to play with seriousness and think of nothing else but adding to our happiness through winning. But after 16 rounds, we would again feast, this time to celebrate our good fortune. And then we would talk into the night until the morning, saying stories about good times in the past and the good times yet to come. This mahjong shit is like, okay, never mind. Mahjong is a pretty big part of the culture, but this just makes me think of the Crazy Rich Asians, like mahjong symbolic bullshit. Oh, what good stories! Stories spilling out all over the place. We almost laughed to death. A rooster that ran into the house, screeching on top of dinner bowls, the same bowls that held him quietly in pieces the next day. And one about a girl who wrote love letters for two friends who loved the same man. And a silly foreign lady who fainted on the toilet when firecrackers went off next to her. Haha. People thought we were wrong to serve banquets every week while many people in the city were starving, eating rats, and later the garbage that the poorest rats used to feed on. Others thought we were possessed by demons to celebrate when even within our own families we had lost generations, had lost homes and fortunes, and were separated, husband from wife, brother from sister, daughter from mother. How could we laugh? People ask. My aircon's really cold. It's not that we had no heart or eyes for pain. We were all afraid. We all had our miseries. But to despair was to wish back for something already lost, or to prolong what was already unbearable. How much can you wish for? How much can you wish for a favorite warm coat that hangs in the closet of a house that burned down with your mother and father inside of it? How long can you see in your mind arms and legs hanging down from telephone wires and starving dogs running down the streets with half-chewed hands dangling from their jaws? What was worse, we asked to sit and wait for our own deaths with proper somber faces, or to choose our own happiness? So we decided to hold parties and pretend each week had become the new year. Each week we could forget past wrongs done to us. We weren't allowed to think a bad thought. We feasted, we laughed, we played games, we lost and won, we told the best stories, and each week we could only hope to be so lucky. That hope was our only joy, and that's how we came to call our little parties Joy Luck. My mother used to end the story on a happy note, bragging about her skill at the game. I won many times and was so lucky the others teased that I had learned the trick of a clever thief. She said, I won tens of thousands of yuan, but I wasn't rich. No, by then paper money had become worthless. Uh, Even toilet paper was worth more, and that made us laugh harder to think 1,000 yuan note wasn't even good enough to rub on our bottoms. I never thought my mother's Guilin story was anything but a Chinese fairy tale. The endings always changed. Sometimes she says she would use that worthless 1,000 yuan note to buy a half cup of rice. She turned that rice into a pot of porridge. She traded that gruel for 2 feet from a pig. Those 2 feet became 6 eggs, and those eggs chicks. It's like a tongue twister. Those 2 feet became 6 eggs. Those eggs, 6 chickens. The story always grew and grew. And then one evening, after I had begged her to buy me a transistor radio, after she refused and I had sulked in silence for an hour, she said, Why do you think you're missing something that you never had? And then she told me a completely different ending to the story. An army officer came to my house early one morning, she said, and told me to go quickly to my husband in Chongqing. And I knew he was telling me to run away from Guilin. I knew what had happened to officers and their families when the Japanese arrived. How could I go? There are no trains leaving Guilin. My friend from Nanjing, she was so good to me. She bribed a man to steal a wheelbarrow we used to haul coal. She promised to warn our other friends. Oh, how long is this fucking book? Oh, we're at 5%. This is gonna be a long read. Pat my jeez. Look, now I know why people pay for fucking Audible, okay? Like this is not easy to read a whole book. I packed my things and my two babies. I packed my things and my two babies into this wheelbarrow and began pushing to Chongqing 4 days before the Japanese marched into Guilin. On the road, I heard news of the slaughter from people running past me. It was terrible. Up to the last day, the Kuomintang insisted that Guilin was safe, protected by the Chinese army. But later that day, the streets of Guilin were strewn with newspapers reporting great Kuomintang victories. And on top of those papers, like fresh fish from a butcher, lay rows of... You don't get fish from a butcher, you get it from a fishmonger. Lay rows of people, men, women, and children who had never lost hope, but had lost their lives instead. When I heard this news, I walked faster and faster, asking myself at each step, were they foolish? Were they brave? I pushed towards Chongqing until my wheel broke. I abandoned my beautiful mahjong table of Hongmu. By then, I didn't have enough feeling left in my body to cry. I tied scarves into slings and put a baby on each side of my shoulder. I carried a bag in each hand, one with clothes, the other with food. I carried these things until deep grooves grew in my hands, and I finally dropped one bag after the other when my hands began to bleed and became too slippery to hold on to anything. Along the way, I saw others had done the same, gradually giving up hope. It was like a pathway inlaid with treasures that grew up in value along the way, bolts of fine fabric and books. I read that wrong completely. Paintings of ancestors and carpenter tools, until one could see cages of ducklings now quiet with thirst, and later still silver urns lying in the road, where people had been too tired to carry them for any kind of future hope. By the time I arrived in Chongqing, I had lost everything except for 3 fancy silk dresses, which I wore one on top of the other. What do you mean by everything? I gasped at the end. I was stunned to realize that the story had been true all along. What happened to the babies? She didn't even pause to think. She simply said in a way that made it clear there was no more to the story. Your father is not my first husband. You are not those babies. Sorry. When I arrive at the Sue's house where the Joy Luck Club is meeting tonight, the first person I see is my father. There she is, never on time, he announces. And it's true, everybody's already here, 7 family friends in their 60s and 70s. They look up and laugh at me, always tardy, a child still at 36. I'm shaking, trying to hold something inside. The last time I saw them at the funeral, I had broken down and cried big gulping sobs. They must wonder now how someone like me can take my mother's place. A friend. Okay, I just thought of a good stand-up joke. I have to write it down. Sorry. Alright. I'm shaking, trying to hold something inside. The last time I saw them at the funeral, I had broken down and cried big gulping sobs. They must wonder now how someone like me can take my mother's place. A friend once told me that my mother and I were alike, that we had the same wispy hand gestures, the same girlish laugh, and sideways look. When I shyly told my mother this, she seemed insulted and said, "You don't even know a little percent of me. How can you be me?" And she's right. How could I be my mother at Joy Luck? Auntie, uncle, I say repeatedly, nodding to each person there. I've always called these old family friends auntie and uncle, and then I walk over and stand next to my father. He's looking at the Zhang's pictures from their recent China trip. Look at that, he says, pointing. Look at that, he says politely, pointing to a photo of the Zhang's tour group standing on wide slab steps. There's nothing in this picture that shows it was taken in China rather than San Francisco, or any other city for that matter. My father doesn't seem to be looking at the picture anyway. It's as though everything were the same to him. Nothing stands out. He has always been politely indifferent, but what's that Chinese word that means indifferent because you can't see any differences? That's how troubled I think he is about my mother's death. Will you look at that? He says, pointing to another nondescript picture. The Sue's house feels heavy with greasy odors. Too many Chinese meals cooked in a too small kitchen. Too many once fragrant smells compressed onto a thin layer of invisible grease. I remember how my mother used to go into other people's houses and restaurants and wrinkle her nose and whisper very loudly, "I can see and feel the stickiness with my nose." I have not been to the Sue's house in many years, but the living room is exactly the same as I remember it. When Auntie May and Uncle George moved to the Sunset District from Chinatown 25 years ago, they bought new furniture. It's all there, still looking mostly new under yellowed plastic. The same turquoise couch shaped in a semicircle of nubby tweed, the colonial end tables made of heavy maple, a lump of fake cracked porcelain. Only the scroll-length calendar, free from the Bank of Canton, changes every year. I remember this stuff because when we were children, Auntie May didn't let us touch any of her new furniture except through the clear plastic coverings. On Joy Luck nights, my parents brought me to the Sue's. Since I was the guest, I had to take care of all the younger children. So many children it seemed as if there was always one baby who was crying from having bumped its head on a table leg. "You're responsible," said my mother, which meant I was in. Ooh, Facebook message. What's that? "You're responsible," said my mother, which meant I was in trouble if anything was spilled, burned, lost, broken, or dirty. I was responsible no matter who did it. She and Auntie May were dressed up in funny Chinese dresses with stiff stand-up collars and blooming branches of embroidered silk sewn over their breasts. These clothes were too fancy for real Chinese people, I thought, and too strange for American parties. In those days, before mother told me her Guilin story, I imagined Joy Luck was a shameful Chinese custom, like the secret gathering of the Ku Klux Klan or the tom tom dances of TV Indians preparing for war. Damn! Check it out. Internalized racism. It's kind of cold. But tonight there's no mystery. The Joy Luck aunties are all wearing slacks, bright pink blouses, and different versions of sturdy walking shoes. We were all seated around the dining room table under a lamp that looks like a Spanish candelabra. What? How do you know what that is? Uncle George puts on his bifocals and starts the meeting by reading the minutes. Our capital account is 24,825, or about 6,206 a couple, 3,103 per person. We sold Subaru for a loss at 6 3/4. We bought 100 shares of Smith International at 7. Our thanks to Lindo and Tin Jong for the goodies. The red bean soup was especially delicious. The March meeting had to be cancelled until further notice. We were sorry to have bid a fond farewell to our dear friend Su Yuan and extend our sympathy to the Canning Wu family. Respectfully submitted, George Su, President and Secretary. That's it. I keep thinking the others will start talking about my mother, the wonderful friendship they shared, and why I am here in her spirit to be the fourth corner and carry on the idea my mother came up with on a hot day in Guilin. But, uh, but everybody just needs to approve. Man, why am I drinking milk for this? But everybody just needs to approve the minutes. Even my father's head bobs up and down routinely, and it seems to me my mother's life had been shelved for new business. Auntie May heaves herself up from the table and moves slowly to the kitchen to prepare the food. And Auntie Lin, my mother's best friend, moves to the turquoise sofa, crosses her arms, and watches the men still seated at the table. Auntie Ying, who seems to shrink even more every time I see her, reaches into her knitting bag and pulls out the start of a tiny blue sweater. The Joy Luck uncles begin to talk about stocks they are interested in buying. Uncle Jack, who is Auntie Ying's younger brother, is very keen on the company that mines gold in Canada. It's a great hedge on inflation, he says with authority. He speaks the best English, almost accentless. I think my mother's English was the worst, but she always thought her Chinese was the best. She spoke Mandarin slightly blurred with a Shanghai dialect. Are we gonna play mahjong tonight? I whispered loudly to Auntie Ying, who's slightly deaf. Later, after midnight. Ladies, are you at this meeting or not? Says Uncle George. After everybody votes unanimously for the Canada Gold stock, I go into the kitchen to ask Auntie May why the Joy Luck Club started investing in stocks. This is a bold thing, man. Fucking Joy Luck stock portfolio. We used to play mahjong, winner take all, but the same people were always winning, the same people always losing, she says. She is stuffing wonton, one chopstick jab of gingery meat dabbed onto a thin skin, and then a single fluid turn with her hand that seals the skin into the shape of a tiny nurse's cap. You can't have luck when someone else has skill. So long time ago, I started doing the accent subconsciously. Oops. I need to be consistent. You can't have luck when someone else has skill. So a long time ago, we decided to invest in the stock market. There's no skill in that. Even your mother agreed. Auntie May takes count of the tray in front of her. She's already made 5 rows of 8 wonton each. 40 wonton, 8 people, 10 each row, 5 more. She says aloud to herself, and then continues stuffing. We got smart. Now we can all win and lose equally. We can have stock market luck, and we can play mahjong for fun, just for a few dollars, winner take all. Losers take home leftovers, so everyone can have some joy. Smart, Han? Han? I watch Auntie May make more wonton. She has quick, expert fingers. She doesn't have to think about what she's doing. That's why my mother used to complain about. Auntie May never thought about what she was doing. She's not stupid, said my mother on one occasion, but she has no spine. Last week I had a good idea for her. I said to her, let's go to the consulate and ask for papers for your brother. And then she almost wanted to drop her things and go right then. But later she talked to someone. Who knows who? And that person told her she can get her brother in bad trouble in China. That person said FBI would put her on a list and give her trouble in the US for the rest of her life. That person said, you ask for a house loan and they say no loan because your brother is a communist. I said, you already have a house. But still, she was scared. Auntie May runs this way and that, said my mother, and she doesn't know why. As I watch Auntie May, I see a short, bent woman in her 70s with a heavy bosom and thin, shapeless legs. She has the flattened, soft fingertips of an old woman. I wonder what Auntie May did to inspire a lifelong stream of criticism from my mother. Then again, it seemed my mother has Then again, it seemed my mother was always displeased with all her friends with me. Skipping commas. With me, and even with my father. Something was always missing. Something always needed improving. Something was not in balance. This one or that had too much of one element, not enough of another. The elements were from my mother's own version of organic chemistry. Each person is made of 5 elements, she told me. Too much fire, and you had a bad temper. That was like my father, whom my mother always criticized for his cigarette habit, and who always shouted back that she should keep her thoughts to herself. I think he now feels guilty that he didn't let my mother speak her mind. Too little wood, and you bent too quickly to listen to other people's ideas, unable to stand on your own. This was like my Auntie May. Too much water, you flowed in too much water and you fall in too many directions, like myself. For having started half a degree in biology and half a degree in art, sounds like a personal attack on me. And then finishing neither when I went off to work for a small ad agency as a secretary, later becoming a copywriter. I used to dismiss her criticisms as just more of her Chinese superstitions, beliefs that conveniently fit the circumstances. In my 20s, while taking intro to psychology, I tried to tell her why she shouldn't criticize so much, why it didn't lead to a healthy learning environment. Drink more water. You know, my voice is kind of going out, so I'm gonna just stop it here. But thank you so much. This is the end of the first kind of episode. Just gonna just try to read something every day, and just whatever. Please like and subscribe if you care. If you don't, it's fine. I have other friends. Thank you. Bye.